My wife came home a little earlier than usual. She usually gets home at 6:30. I work at the warehouse from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., and I am a supervisor there. I have been working in the warehouse for about 11 years. I am 45 years old, well-built, and strong, as I have been doing physical labor most of my life. My wife of 20 years has worked in offices for most of her working life. Louise now works in a library that serves students. She is also 45 years old but is often mistaken for younger. She is 5 feet 5 inches in tall and has a slim figure. Our marriage has not changed much over the past 20 years. We live comfortably, go on vacations, see friends and family, and enjoy life as a married couple. We are, in every sense of the word, a happily married couple. Sex has never been something special in our married life. We tend to be more about loving, touching, caressing, and kissing rather than having sex every night, 3 times a night. Yes, we have sex, but again, it is not the main thing in our life. Once or twice a week is the norm for us. When we make love, we are both satisfied, and we vary our actions. My wife is adventurous in bed, and we try new positions most of the night. Our favorite position is the cowboy position. My wife's breasts are beautiful. They are still firm after all these years. She works out at the gym twice a week and works hard to maintain her body. And yes, it draws attention to her, but she has never cheated on me. It's just not in her character. Her work clothes are usually suits with a skirt or pants and a blouse, or some other casual top. No matter what she is wearing, she looks great in any outfit. At home, she is very casual and usually chooses shorts and tops or leggings and t-shirts. We don't have children, but we are involved in my extended family. I have a large family of nieces and nephews, so we spend time with the kids and then pass them back. As I mentioned, my wife came home early today. She didn't seem to notice me sitting in the living room as she walked into the house while undressing. I got up, made myself some coffee, and made my wife some coffee as well. We both drink black coffee with no sugar. She doesn't like coffee like her men do. I was dressed in my usual work suit, jeans, t-shirt, and steel toe boots. My wife has a second sense of smell when it comes to coffee. "Gary!" she shouted, coming down the stairs. "Yes, Louise? Who else were you expecting?" I said jokingly. "Well, actually, I was expecting someone else, a guy from work. You might remember the one who keeps asking me out to lunch." She walked down the stairs, dressed in a tight, low-cut top and shorts. The shorts weren't very short, but short enough to show off her legs. And when she turned around, she showed off her firm ass. I stared at her for a while, then grabbed her and kissed her hard on the lips, and then I grabbed her ass and pulled her to me. After kissing for a few minutes, she gently pushed me away. She picked up her coffee and started drinking it. After taking a few sips, she looked at me. "Honey, that guy I was telling you about is coming here in about 10 minutes, she said. This with a serious expression on her face. "You mean he's coming here to ask you out on a date?" I asked in shock. "A date?" Well, Roger, was under the impression that he had been asking me out to lunch every day for the past 2 months, and I had been turning him down. So he changed tactics. He asked me to go to a concert with him. He said he'd pick me up in 10 minutes. Roger Clark, the man you first met in high school, the man who runs the company you work for, the man who apparently isn't shy about pursuing a married woman. My wife smiled. "Yes, he is. He'll be here in 5 minutes. Gary, in most of the stories on this site that we have both read, the wife says to her husband, "I'm leaving, I'll be back late," or "Don't wait up for me," or "It's just sex, it doesn't mean anything." She might also say, "I'll come back and be your loving wife," or "I just have to do this, my wonderful husband." The most murderous statement of all is, "If you loved me, you'd let me do this." Gary, honey, Roger is 63, physically strong. He probably won't give up that easily. And if you don't want me to go with him, you'd better decide soon. He'll be here any moment now. At that moment, there was a knock on our front door. Louise looked at me and gestured to the door. I looked at her and said, "Are you sure you want to do this? Do you really want me to open the door, let him in the house, and then let him ask you out?" "Gary, open the door, let him in the house." I went to the door and there stood Roger, all 6 feet 3 inches of him. He held out his hand to me. I just looked at it. Gary, there's no need for that. I'm just inviting your lovely wife to the concert. But of course, whatever happens after the concert is entirely her choice. However, he added, we have discussed this, and it appears that you are in agreement for her to stay after the concert. He delivered this speech in a very condescending manner. Louise walked down the hall and stood next to me. She walked over to me, kissed me on the cheek, and whispered, now, Gary, my love. I stepped back, and Roger walked into the house. He looked at my wife and what she was wearing and smirked, about to say something to Louise, but instead, folded over in pain as I kicked him in the balls with all my might. My steel-toed boots did their job, and he fell to the floor and started rolling around on it in agony, clutching his groin. At that moment, Louise picked up a piece of paper from the table near the door and showed it to him. This is a sexual harassment claim against you and your company, she said. Several other women have filed the same claim against you. Their husbands are also going to speak to you personally, just as my husband has spoken to you. At that moment, 5 couples we had gotten to know well over the past few months pulled up to the driveway. They were waiting outside, waiting for the signal to enter the house. The first to enter were Jim and Stacy, then Darren and Sarah, then Sandra and David, Peter and Angela, and finally Andrew and Carol. All of them had dealt with Roger at some point, and they all had his sexual harassment, abuse, and inappropriate behavior in common. For the past 2 weeks, the wives had made plans together. They had a shark of a woman, a lawyer, to help them in court and give them advice. They all entered the house and stepped over the rolling man. The women threw their statements on the floor next to him. Each of the 5 husbands kicked Roger in the balls. The women kicked Roger wherever they wanted. He was covered in bruises and just lay there moaning. By the time everyone was done, he was almost unconscious. My husband and I picked him up and carried him to the car. Then one of the husbands drove the car home, and the other followed and brought him home. Yes, we knew what we had done was wrong, and if we were caught, we would probably be charged with assault. However, we knew he wouldn't risk telling his wife what had happened. But the wives had their own thoughts on the matter. Over the past couple of months, the women had recorded and noted every time he had touched them or made sexual innuendos. More than once, he had offered to pay them for sex. So everything was set up so that everyone had evidence and proof of his behavior. Then we had a barbecue with the whole group, and if anyone asked, we swore we had been here all evening and had no idea what had happened to Roger or that he had come to the house. The papers were left in his car, in the passenger seat, and his wife was left a message that was very simple. Her husband was a serial sex maniac who took advantage of his position to try to have sex with different women at work. Twice he had successfully had sex with married female co-workers. The marriages had broken up, but in both cases the wife had cited him as the cause. However, it had all been hushed up, and the women had paid him off. The letter states that the 5 women got together and defended themselves by never being alone with him and recording everything he did and said. The letter also states that despite numerous attempts, he was unable to convince the women to have sex with him, but he persisted. This led to him getting more and more frustrated until he finally targeted only my wife and threatened her with a job if she didn't accept his ultimatum. It was 2 weeks ago when my wife told me everything, and then told me about her plans with other women. She knew that I would never agree to her being with him or any other man. Louise stated that she would never imagine me sharing her, and she would never share me either, which was fine with both of us. The other wives then told their husbands, and one of them actually sat down and told his wife what had happened. When at first, his wife disagreed with who her husband was, the other wives and my wife got together and told his wife about the innuendos, the attempts to leave them alone, the casual touching or him pinning them down, and finally the threats of termination if they did not comply. They then played the tapes and hidden camera footage. She eventually believed them and began to act on the information she received. We later learned that she filed for divorce after receiving a large sum of money from him. She also got his company. At least she owned it. She fired him and put an up-and-coming female executive at the head of the company. After we enjoyed the barbecue and discussed what had happened, our new friends left, shaking hands and hugging each other. It was just me and Louise left, so my sexy wife. There are stories on this site that end with the husband somehow enjoying his wife sleeping in front of him and the sexy wife walking out the door, coming home later and telling her husband about her exploits. This is not such a story, however. I have a sexy wife that I will entertain, but only me and no one else. With those words, I picked up my wife and carried her upstairs. And yes, we did make love. Then we fell asleep in each other's arms. Life is good.